I hope you guys enjoyed that short sequence I put together with sample footage I shot on the A7 III paired with the Ecolite 200DL underwater housing. Before you spend more than 2000 USD on this housing, I really think you should watch this video because the results were rather surprising. Especially when I compared it to the Seafrogs housing, which is significantly cheaper. Hey guys, what's up? My name is Bernard and welcome to the channel. Firstly, I would like to give a shout out to Camera Rental Center for loaning me this premium underwater housing for this user experience review. Some of you might know that I have been using the Seafrogs housing for a while now, and I have actually made 2 review videos about it. You can check it out via the links in the description. In the underwater housing world, the Seafrogs is known as the budget option, and thoughts of upgrading has crossed my mind many times. This is where the 200DL housing comes in. Ecolite is one of the reputable brands for underwater camera gear, and the price for their products definitely reflects that. And since we are on the subject of price, let us discuss how much it will cost to buy the Ecolite underwater housing. For this particular scenario, I will be calculating how much it will cost to use either the A7 III or the R3 with a 16-35 f4 wide angle lens and the 90mm macro lens. Here are the items you will need: 200DL underwater housing, DL42mm port extension, DL compact 8-inch dome port, the zoom gear for the 16-35 f4, DL port system zoom gear retainer. This will come included with the housing. DL20mm port extension, DL macro flat port. The total cost amounts to 2,906 USD. For you to use the same setup with the Seafrog system, it will only cost you 849 USD, which is less than a third of the price. Comparing the two housings, you will notice that the Ecolite housing has more components to it. This can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it is more cumbersome to deal with as there are more pieces to manage when setting up. On the other hand, it gives you more customization options when it comes to lens selection. And it takes up less storage space as you can break it down to smaller pieces. Let's take a closer look at the Ecolite system to see if that price is justified. I must say that when I got my hands on the housing for the first time, I was really impressed with the build quality. Compared to the Seafrogs housing, everything felt more premium and robust. I particularly like that the clear acrylic bag provides a clear view of the camera. With this, if there is a leak and some droplets of water manage to make its way into the housing, I will be able to see it immediately and abort the dive straight away. One benefit of the Ecolite housing is that the bag is fully removable. For the Seafrogs housing, the hinge on the bag is fixed, and whenever it is open, the housing loses its balance, and that is very annoying when I'm trying to remove or put my camera in. Another thing that really stood out was the 3 metal clasp. It feels so much better than the plastic one found on the Seafrog. As a result of the sturdier build, the Ecolite is rated to a depth of 60 meters, while the Seafrogs only has a rating of 40 meters. If you are looking to take your camera to deeper depths, the choice is pretty clear as only the Ecolite housing is capable of handling that. However, I must say that 40 meters is usually more than enough for any leisure diver. Let's now take a look at the ports. From what it seems, the front element is made out of the same material. That is rather disappointing as I thought the Ecolite's ports would be better as it costs more. I would say that the biggest difference between the ports is how they are assembled to the housing. The Seafrog's port is attached to the housing via a twist mechanism. It is very much like how you attach and remove a lens to the camera body. The Ecolite housing, however, adopts a totally different method. Basically, all you have to do is align the different components and screw it in via these knobs. I think I'm pretty neutral between the two systems, and it boils down to personal preference. I do have one complaint about the Ecolite's port, and that is about the size of the knobs. It is too small and it could do with better nerves to help you obtain a firmer grip. In between dives, when my hands were wet, I found it a challenge to unscrew the knobs. You could use a tool to help with that, which is a plus point, but that means you have more stuff to carry about. Next, we'll look at the zoom gear for both systems. Right off the bat, the Ecolite system looks and feels fancy, and to a certain extent, it works better too. When zooming in and out, it feels much more reliable, unlike the Seafrog's housing, which tends to come off the threads when you accidentally use too much strength. However, the installation process for this zoom gear is very confusing at the start and very troublesome. One thing I really dislike about it is that the camera sensor is left face up and exposed to the elements for a period of time. Another complaint that I have is if you want to remove the camera body when you want to change batteries or use your camera on land, you have to first remove the port and the lens. Vice versa, when you want to put your camera into the housing, you have to go through that tedious process. The good thing about the Seafrox housing is that you can remove your entire camera without all the fuss. Let's now take a look at the internals of the housing. Both housing comes with a leak detection system, but what is really special about the Ecolite housing is that it comes with a base plate, and I really like that it helps you place your camera into the housing much more accurately and effortlessly. I would like to point out that the rubber portions tend to fall quite easily, so do take note to prevent losing them. The same problem occurs in the Seafrox housing, and I don't understand why they don't just glue it together permanently to avoid this problem. We now move on to the buttons and knobs on the housing that help you control the camera. The very first difference you will notice is that the buttons on the Ecolite housing is not labelled. This is a very poor design flaw because having an indication on the button makes it so much more user friendly. I also prefer the placement and the design of the buttons on the Seafrox housing, but it is not a big deal and I can live with what the Ecolite offers. The biggest thing about the Ecolite housing that helps it stand out is that it gives you access to both the front and the back dial that allows you to control the aperture and the shutter speed. For the Seafrox housing, you only have access to the back dial. In my previous videos, I've shown how you can get around this limitation, but I'm glad that Ecolite offers you the full control. However, on the Seafrox housing, you do get access to the control wheel, which is not present on the Ecolite. If I had to pick between the two, I would choose to have control over the front and the back dial over the control wheel. Both housings unfortunately lack access to the joystick. The last thing I want to talk about is ergonomics. As you can see, the Ecolite housing is physically bigger. It is also shaped like a cube. In essence, the housing does not feel very secure in your hands as it is too large for you to get a good grip. I would highly recommend that you use this housing with a camera tray so you can handle it better. On the other hand, the Seafrox housing is not only smaller, it is more ergonomically designed. The case comes with contours for you to get a better grip. I would still recommend that you use a camera tray with this housing, but going handheld is still an option, but not for the Ecolite. Just so you know, both housings are positively buoyant, which means you will need weights to keep it from surfacing. It is now time to conclude the video, and here are my thoughts on both housings. If you are a professional underwater photographer or videographer, the sturdier build of the Ecolite housing is sure to give you a peace of mind when you bring your camera for dives. I felt very reassured using this housing because I could monitor everything via the clear back panel. Having access to both the front and the back dial is probably the biggest selling point for this housing, and that is something a professional would need. In exchange for those benefits, you would have to spend so much more and deal with a bulkier case. I found myself dreading the transportation and the setting up of this housing. I also think that the housing is not as user-friendly and the workflow is more troublesome. I actually think that the Seafrox housing will be more suitable for the mass market. The price of this housing will be easier for people to enter the world of underwater photography and videography. I also think that the ergonomics and the workflow on this housing is better and more suitable for beginners. However, I did find myself being worried about my gear more often, and there were some questionable moments that made me doubt my housing. But to clarify, nothing bad has happened so far. For my situation, I am using an old camera and lens, which is why I'm still willing to deal with the risk. If I was using an expensive setup like the A7S III with a G Master lens, I would definitely opt for the Ecolite for obvious reasons. That pretty much sums up my thoughts on both housings and my recommendation. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it useful. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did. That's it for today, it's a wrap!